What's up, everybody? Derek Anderson, the DA, and this is my review of She-Hulk episode 5. Man, like, you guys thought the CW was bad. The CW shows look like masterpiece theater in comparison to this stuff. You know, comic book fans, in my opinion, deserve way better than this. She-Hulk is not just some throwaway character that you could just kind of play around with and do whatever you want to do. I read She-Hulk comic books when I was a kid, you know, and they could have done a 10 times better job than what they've given us. This is by far the worst episode they've had for this show so far. Episode 5 is the worst, and it took me like another 2 days to get through like the 20 minutes of show that it had. It's just something that's really hard to watch. I'm honestly not sure why anybody should be bothering with this show anymore, but I guess, well, we're already halfway home, so we might as well just finish this thing off. Like, this is a sitcom where the situations are boring and stupid and the comedy is just pretty much non-existent. And the thing about it is, like other MCU shows, you have kind of like this overarching plot, right? Where you're kind of following a story along and they're giving you like little things here and there. There's a villain, there's a main villain, and then there's, you know, the hero. And even if you don't like the show, you're kind of still following the story, so that gives you something to do, something to follow. This show is giving us nothing. It's literally a situational comedy where there's a different situation every week and they make a comedy about it, and that's what it is. It's literally the misadventures of Jennifer Walters, and we get very little She-Hulk action in this thing altogether. Like I said, there's no villain at all. Like, there's really no overarching villain. I mean, Titania showed up a couple of times, but is she the villain of this show? No, not really, right? I guess if anything was the villain, it would be like society, right? You know, society has somehow become the villain against women in their 30s who can't seem to get a good date or get the respect that they deserve. They're all nice and fun-loving and attractive, but they just can't get what they want out of life, you know? And it's society's fault. Like, that's how this show comes off to me. Somehow the world is broken, and it's not our fault as women, it's society's fault. They never like take the time to say, okay, you know, well, we're also a part of society. So maybe instead of, you know, ragging and whining about all the problems, maybe, you know, just take a little bit of self-reflection. Yo, man in the mirror, writers, you know, maybe look at that. Because like I said, She-Hulk is just an avatar for the writers, okay? She is literally just spewing out the nonsense that these people feel in their real lives. She is not a character whatsoever. She is literally the face of their gripes and complaints about the world. No one cares about your problems, ladies, all right? We're here for comic book heroes and good entertainment, all right? Work out your personal problems with your therapist. Seriously. So, She-Hulk in this episode is dealing with copyright infringement. Dumb. I mean, it's just completely ridiculous. Titania, who somehow damn near destroyed an entire courtroom in the first episode, is number one, not in prison, go figure, but then number two is out selling a line of products using the She-Hulk name. And Jennifer Walters, because of the pressure by her boss, she basically has to sue her, and she hires this black chick, Mallory, and that's the courtroom crap that we get this week. And then what's even worse is Mallory says, okay, if I'm going to represent you, you got to clean your look up. You got to look a little bit better than that. And her little assistant, you know, the She-Hulk assistant, I don't even remember her name. It doesn't even matter. She's already on the case trying to get She-Hulk a suit. She's still wearing the same old dumpy suit. That whole payoff doesn't come into play at all because we don't even get to see the suit that was supposedly made for her. It's like this end at the very end. She goes into a dressing room and we never get to see it. So I guess this is like the cliffhanger for episode 6, right? What suit did this guy make for She-Hulk? So, and then in order to win the case, like, She-Hulk drags in all the men that dated her from the previous episode, you know, and she basically makes them admit that the only reason that I went out with her is because she is the She-Hulk, and if it wasn't for the fact that she is the She-Hulk, I never would have went out for her. And somehow that proves that Jennifer has the rights to the name She-Hulk, even though Titania has already copyrighted it. This is the kind of trash writing we're getting from the MCU these days, folks, okay? This is what we're getting. It's just complete and utter and total nonsense, all right? Without a shred of logic, without a shred of thought. Because I guess in their heads, they think Since this is a superhero fictional world, we could just go ahead and say anything we want to say. Courtrooms don't have to follow any kind of logical consistency or anything like that. Nah. Because again, I have no idea how that argument would work on anybody. How does that argument make any sense? How does that prove anything? How? And look, obviously at this point, we have to say that this show was written by women in their 30s for women in their 30s. That's basically where it's at, okay? And I don't know if that's the target audience that Marvel is trying to shoot for. Maybe they are. Maybe they're saying, hey, we got this demographic out there. We got to rope these ladies in. Let's go ahead and do a sitcom, Sex in the City 30-something kind of sitcom. And let's just bring all of these ladies in. They'll absolutely love it. But here's the problem with that concept, is that this show can only exist in the framework of an MCU. In other words, this show cannot exist unless there is a successful Marvel Cinematic Universe standing beside it, okay? That's the only way that this show even remotely makes any sense for anybody. It is a show that cannot stand on its own feet. It cannot stand on its own merits, the merits of its own ideas, okay? It can't do that. This show cannot and does not exist without the strength of the MCU standing right next to it. It can only exist as an addendum to a larger cinematic universe. That's the only way this show exists. And honestly, that's a major problem. Like, your show shouldn't need like the strength of the 14 years of the MCU and all of the characters and the storylines that have come before it so that it can be taken seriously by critics and fans. That's the only reason that people are even caring about this show, all right? Take the MCU off of this, make this some other character, and this thing is dead in the water. Nobody cares. And that's the problem. This whole idea that you don't have to tell good stories, or you could just tell garbage stories, you could just play fast and loose with characters just because you're a part of a larger universe is crap. Comic book stories and characters were always written with certain audiences in mind. And whereas there is always going to be some kind of crossover appeal where you could say, all right, we could get people of this audience and kind of cross them over in here once we adapt it to film and television, that's always going to be the case. But you should always try to tell stories that were made for the audience that existed in the first place, okay? Those are the people that made this particular character popular, all right? She-Hulk never would have been popular doing this stuff. It never would have made it if it was doing this type of storytelling, ever. So you should at least try to get close to that. I mean, it's literally the same conversation that I have about the Rings of Power. You didn't create She-Hulk, ladies. You merely adopted it. That was it. You just adopted the character. You were given permission to translate it from comic books to film or into television, and you've done an absolutely trash job of it. If you were the original writers for this character, She-Hulk never would have gotten off the ground, ever. She would have been dead back in the 80s where she came from. All right, she never would have gotten off the ground. And that's something that, honestly, the writers really need to sit back and think about, because this is just abject failure. And these writers should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. I'll be quite honest with you. Anyway, folks, that's my review of She-Hulk episode 5. Worst episode so far. And that's saying something compared to the previous 4 episodes that came before it. But go ahead, leave me your thoughts and your opinions in the comments below. And thanks for watching. See you next time.